It was made of wood, not partly wood, not wood in places. The fuselage was two thin skins of birch plywood with a layer of balsa in between, glued together and molded over concrete forms. The wings were spruce and plywood. It was assembled by furniture factories, cabinet makers, coach builders, and at least one piano manufacturer, most of whom had never built an aircraft in their lives. It carried no defensive guns at all, no turrets, no gunners. Two men sitting side by side in an unarmed wooden aeroplane over Germany in daylight. The Air Ministry rejected the design 3 times. Inside the ministry, it had a nickname. They called it Freeman's Folly, after the one senior officer who kept refusing to kill it. They were wrong about it. For roughly 2.5 years, it was the fastest operational aircraft in the world. It could carry the same 4,000-pound bomb to Berlin that an American heavy bomber carried, using 2 men instead of 10. And it finished the war with the lowest loss rate of any aircraft in Royal Air Force Bomber Command, by a margin that is not close. The most famous description of it was not written by a British historian. It was shouted, in public, by the commander-in-chief of the German Air Force, in a speech that had itself been interrupted by the aircraft he was complaining about. This is the story of the de Havilland Mosquito. But to understand why nobody wanted it, you have to understand what everybody believed about bombers in 1938. The governing idea of the 1930s was that the bomber will always get through, not as a slogan, as planning doctrine. A bomber formation was expected to fight its way to the target and fight its way home, defending itself with its own guns, in much the same way a warship does. Everything followed from that. If a bomber must defend itself, it needs turrets. Turrets need gunners. Gunners need oxygen, heating, ammunition, and armor plate to sit behind. All of that is weight, and weight has to be carried by a bigger airframe with more engines, which is heavier again, which needs still more defensive guns to protect it. The end of that chain was the 4-engined heavy bomber, 7 men, 8 or more machine guns, around 30 tons, and the arithmetic never actually worked. A gunner in a freezing turret, firing a rifle-caliber machine gun at a fighter closing at 400 miles an hour, was very rarely the man who won that exchange. Bomber Command lost more than 55,000 aircrew over the course of the war. Geoffrey de Havilland looked at exactly the same problem and reached the opposite conclusion. His argument was simple, and to the Air Ministry, it sounded like nonsense. Take the guns out, take out the turrets, take out the gunners, take out the ammunition, the armor, the extra crew positions, and everything fitted to support them. The aircraft loses several tons. Now put 2 Rolls-Royce Merlin engines on it, the same engines that powered the Spitfire, attached to an airframe carrying almost nothing. It becomes very fast indeed, fast enough that no fighter can catch it. And an aircraft that cannot be caught does not need guns to defend itself. The logic is circular, and that is precisely the problem with it. It only works if you commit completely. Add a single turret for reassurance, and the whole thing collapses, because now you have a slow bomber with 1 gun, which is the worst of both worlds. To an air ministry that had spent a decade building its entire doctrine around defensive firepower, sending unarmed men over Germany was not a bold idea. It was closer to negligence. And then there was the wood. Britain in 1940 had 2 shortages that mattered more than money: aluminium, which had to cross the Atlantic past submarines, and skilled metalworkers, every single one of whom was already employed somewhere else. Wood required neither. The structure de Havilland designed was a sandwich: an outer skin of birch plywood, a core of balsa, an inner skin of birch plywood, bonded together. Balsa is extraordinarily light and almost useless on its own. Trapped between 2 stressed plywood faces, it becomes very stiff for its weight. It is the same principle as a cardboard box, executed properly. The fuselage was built in 2 vertical halves over enormous concrete molds, fitted out on the inside while both halves were still open, and then glued together. That last detail matters more than it sounds. Installing controls, wiring, and equipment into an open half shell at bench height is dramatically faster than threading all of it through the inside of a finished metal tube. And the people who could do that work were not aircraft workers, they were joiners. So the work went out to the furniture trade, cabinet makers, coach builders, shop fitters, a piano manufacturer, hundreds of small workshops scattered across Britain, many of them in villages, producing components in premises that no bombing raid would ever bother to target, using timber and glue and a set of skills that were not needed anywhere else in the war effort. It was, in the strictest sense, free production capacity. Nothing that went into building a Mosquito was competing with anything else, none of which persuaded anybody. The Air Ministry turned the design down in 1938. It turned it down again in 1939. In 1940, with invasion expected within months, the Minister of Aircraft Production ordered the project stopped altogether so that de Havilland could concentrate on repairing existing aircraft and building wings for other people's designs. It survived because one man kept quietly protecting it. Air Chief Marshal Wilfred Freeman put through an order for 50 aircraft, largely on his own authority, and absorbed the ridicule that came with doing so. Hence the nickname, Freeman's Folly. The prototype flew on the 25th of November, 1940, painted bright yellow. It did just under 400 miles an hour. That was faster than the Spitfire then in frontline service. A wooden bomber, built by furniture makers, carrying bombs, was faster than the fastest fighter the Royal Air Force possessed. The argument inside the ministry ended fairly quickly after that. What followed was one of the most adaptable aircraft ever built. The same basic airframe became a fast bomber, a night fighter, a pathfinder marking targets for the heavy raids, a photographic reconnaissance aircraft, a maritime strike aircraft carrying a 57mm cannon in its nose, and even a civilian transport flying ball bearings out of neutral Sweden through German-controlled airspace with passengers lying in the bomb bay. But the moment that fixed it permanently in German memory came on the 30th of January, 1943. That date was the 10th anniversary of the Nazi seizure of power. Berlin had arranged a full day of ceremony, and Hermann Göring was scheduled to broadcast to the nation at 11 o'clock in the morning. 3 Mosquitoes arrived over Berlin at 11 o'clock exactly. It was the first daylight raid on the German capital of the entire war. Göring's broadcast was delayed by around an hour while air raid sirens sounded across the city, live on national radio. That afternoon, Joseph Goebbels was scheduled to speak. 3 more Mosquitoes arrived during his broadcast as well. The physical damage done by 6 aircraft was militarily trivial. The damage was never the point. Göring's response is documented, and it is worth hearing in full because he said it out loud in front of an audience of German aircraft manufacturers. In 1940, he said, "I could at least fly as far as Glasgow in most of my aircraft, but not now. It makes me furious when I see the Mosquito. I turn green and yellow with envy. The British, who can afford aluminium better than we can, knock together a beautiful wooden aircraft that every piano factory over there is building, and they give it a speed which they have now increased yet again. There is nothing the British do not have. They have the geniuses, and we have the nincompoops." That is the head of the Luftwaffe, describing a British aeroplane to the men responsible for building German ones. The other thing the Mosquito could do was hit one specific building. Because it flew low and fast and in very small numbers, it could be sent against targets that a heavy bomber formation could not touch without flattening everything around them. In February 1944, Mosquitoes breached the walls of the prison at Amiens, where French resistance members were being held under sentence of death, in an attack flown at rooftop height. In October 1944, they destroyed the Gestapo headquarters at Aarhus in Denmark, along with its records. In March 1945, they attacked the Gestapo headquarters in Copenhagen, a building where prisoners were deliberately held on the top floor as human shields. That last raid is also the reason the Mosquito's precision should never be romanticized. One aircraft in the formation clipped a light mast on the run-in and crashed near a Catholic school. Aircraft following behind, looking for the smoke that marked the target, bombed the fire instead. 86 children were killed. The raid also succeeded. The building was destroyed, the records burned, and a number of prisoners escaped in the confusion. Both of those things are true at the same time, and the men who flew it lived with both for the rest of their lives. The numbers on the aircraft as a whole are what settled the original argument permanently. A Mosquito could carry a 4,000-pound bomb to Berlin. So could an American B-17. The B-17 needed 10 men to do it. The Mosquito needed 2. And the Mosquito was far less likely to be shot down. Its loss rate across Bomber Command operations was under 1% per sortie, at a time when the 4-engined heavies were losing several times that figure. Run that arithmetic across an entire campaign, and it stops being a technical curiosity and becomes a moral one. The unarmed aircraft, the one that had been called reckless, was the one that kept bringing its crews home. Nearly 8,000 of them were built. Now go back to the objections, because every single one of them was factually correct. It was made of wood. It was. Mosquitoes operating in the heat and humidity of the Far East did suffer glue failures and structural problems, exactly as the skeptics had warned they would. It was unarmed. It was. A Mosquito caught by a fighter it could not outrun had nothing whatsoever to fight back with. It was built by people who did not build aeroplanes. It was. Every objection was true, and every objection was the reason it worked. Wood meant it did not compete for aluminium or for a single skilled metalworker. Being unarmed meant it was light. Being light meant it was fast. Being fast meant it did not need to be armed. And being built by furniture makers meant it could be produced in hundreds of small buildings that the Luftwaffe would never think to bomb. The Air Ministry was not stupid. It assessed the aircraft against the doctrine it already had, and the aircraft had been designed to make that doctrine irrelevant. There is one final detail, and it is close to perfect. Göring did not only complain, he ordered German industry to build one. The result was the Focke-Wulf Ta-154, given the official name Mosquito, a twin-engined wooden night fighter copying the concept directly. It was not a bad aeroplane, but the specialized adhesive it depended on was produced at a single chemical works, and that works was destroyed in a bombing raid. The substitute glue that German industry supplied instead turned out to be acidic. It attacked the wood it was supposed to be holding together. Airframes began coming apart. The program was abandoned. The Germans could copy the aircraft. What they could not copy was a country with a furniture industry that had nothing else to do, and the glue to hold the result together. If you found this one interesting, subscribe for more stories about the weapons everybody underestimated.